Hello, welcome to today's edition of the Daf Yomi, Tractate Menachot Daf 74 Amud B. We'll dive straight in. I do not raise a dilemma. When I raise a dilemma, it is with regard to the prohibition of shall it be offered in its entirety, it shall not be eaten, was halacha. Is this prohibition applicable only to a meal offering of a priest mentioned in the verse, or does it apply to a priest who eats from the sacrificial portions as well? Rav Aaron, who's that? Very little is known of this fifth generation Babylonian Amora. In each of his two appearances in the Talmud here and in Baba Kama 109b, he resolved the question posed by Ravina. He said to Ravina, come here and answer this question for that which is taught in the Brayta. Rabbi Eliezer says, with regard to every sacrificial item, not just the meal offering of a priest, such as the sacrificial portions, which is including the category of shall be offered in its entirety, that requires it to be burned, the verse serves to impose a prohibition against eating it. If one eats an olive bulk of a sacrificial portion from a burnt offering, he is liable to receive lashes. This is a halacha whether he eats it before or after the blood is sprinkled, and whether he is a priest or an Israelite. This is so because the assorted portions are to be entirely offered upon the altar, as is required in the case of a burnt offering. The sages derived from the verse that states with regard to the priest meal offering, offered in its entirety, it shall not be eaten, that any offering that must be entirely sacrificed is subject to a prohibition against its consumption. 11.3 Mishnah. Minchas kohanim, minchas kohen, Mashiach, minchas not nechasim. The meal offering of priests, minchas kohanim, handfuls are not removed from the meal offerings of a priest. Instead, the entire offering is burnt upon the altar, in accordance with the ruling of the unattributed Mishnah. 12.9. The meal offering of an anointed priest. All of the griddle cake offering of a high priest is burnt upon the altar, in accordance with the ruling of the unattributed Mishnah. 13.4. I, the high priest, and the meal offering brought with libations. Minchat nechasim. A meal offering brought with libation is completely burned upon the outer altar, in accordance with the ruling of the unattributed Mishnah. 2.1. The accompanying burnt offering and peace offerings are burnt in their entirety on the altar, and there is no part of them for the priest. Minchas kohanim lezbech ve'ein bahem lakohanim. The Rambam explains the reason for this halacha. Normally, when one offers a meal offering, only the removed handful and, in some cases, frankincense are placed on the altar, while the rest is eaten. Therefore, if the priest would perform the rite for such a meal offering, and then eat almost the entire meal offering, it would appear as though he had not brought an offering of any substance. And that's from the Guide of the Perplexed, 346. And in the case of those offerings, the power of the altar is greater than the power of the priest. The 2 loaves, i.e. the public offering on Shavuot, are 2 loaves baked from new wheat and the shrew bread. Neither the offering of the 2 loaves, which is brought on Shavuot, nor the shrew bread, which is made each Shabbat, are offered upon the altar. Rather, they are entirely eaten by the priest, in accordance with the ruling of the unattributed Mishnah. 12.3. The 12 loaves that were placed on the sacred table in the sanctuary each Shabbat are eaten by the priest, and there is no part of them burned on the altar. And in the case of those offering, the power of the priest is greater than the power of the altar. The Gemara asks, and there are no additional cases. And the Gemara asks, and are there no additional cases of sacrificial items that are completely burned on the altar, placed on the altar, with none of their parts given to the priest? But isn't there the burnt offering, which is completely burned on the altar? The Gemara answers, there is a burnt offering hide, which is given to the priest. The Gemara asks, but isn't there the bird sacrifices the burnt offering, whose skin is not given to the priest? The Gemara answers, there is a bird burnt offering's crop and its feathers, which are not burned upon the altar. The Gemara asks, but aren't there wine libations, which are completely poured onto the altar? The Gemara answers, the libations go to the drain pipes, the shisin. Drain pipes are made up of the holes and pipes that were on the altar and beneath it. The tops of these drain pipes were narrow holes on the southwestern corner of the altar. Via these pipes, the blood and the libations would descend to the canal that passed through the temple, carrying them to the Kidron River. The Gemara reports that once every 70 years, the young priest would descend into the small space between the altar and its ramp on the western side of the ramp in order to clear away the congealed remnants of the wine libations. Sukkah 49a. According to one tradition, the drain pipes opened to a cistern 1 cubit wide and 600 cubits deep. Consequently, it must be understood that the young priest descended not to the bottom of the drain pipes, but either they used various instruments for the task or they simply cleaned whatever space they could access, the respondent of the kohanim. The Gemara in Zevachim 61b relates that when the Jews returned from Babylonia and built the second temple, they expanded the side of the altar. By adding 4 cubits in length on the south and 4 cubits in width on the west, at a right angle, they included the area of the drain pipes in the space of the altar. When the first temple was built, it was understood that the altar must be completely filled with earth, because of the verse that states, "An altar of earth you shall make for me," in Exodus 20:20. Therefore, the hollow drain pipes could not have been within the altar. When the second temple was built, the verse was interpreted otherwise, and it was understood that the altar should consume the liquid libations in the same manner that it consumes the fat and flesh and fats, such that the drain pipes had to open on the top of the altar and not at its side. And there's a picture here of the drain pipe openings at the base of the altar. There was another footnote. Nechotim neshisin azlei. Libations go to the drain pipe. When wine is brought to the temple as libations without accompanying an offering, the priest puts salt into the wine and pours all of it into the drain pipes in the manner of all libations, as indicated in the Mishnah contrary to the opinion of Shmuel. Halachot 16:4. And pouring the wine into the drain pipes is not considered placing it upon the altar. The Gemara asks, and what is meant when the Mishnah emphasizes, and in the case of those offerings, the power of the altar is greater than the power of the priest, indicating that there are other items that one might have thought are burnt entirely on the altar as well. The Gemara answers, the Mishnah's wording serves to exclude the opinion of Shmuel. As Shmuel said, one who donates wine brings it and pours it over the fires of the altar, such that it is offered in the manner of an animal offering and not as a libation. Therefore, the Mishnah's wording teaches that the wine donated in this manner goes to the drain pipes, unlike, according to the opinion of Shmuel, that it is entirely burned. The Gemara adds, with regard to another ruling, the Mishnah supports a different statement of Shmuel. As Shmuel said, one who donates oil, hamisna deiv shemen, if one donates oil to the temple, the priest takes a handful of it, adds salt to the handful, and casts it onto the fire. The remainder is eaten by the priest, just as they eat the remainder of meal offerings in accordance with the ruling of Shmuel. And that's from the Rambam Sefer halachot 16:14. To the temple, removes a handful and sacrifices it on the altar, and its remainder is eaten by the priest. Shmuel's ruling is according to the Mishnah, which does not list a donation of oil as one of the offerings given completely to the altar. According to the Mishnah, with regard to the two loaves and shewbread, the power of the priest is greater than the power of the altar. The Gemara asks, and are there no more cases of sacrificial items that are given completely to the priest, with none of their parts placed upon the altar? But isn't there the bird sacrifice as a sin offering, which is eaten entirely by the priest, and none of it is placed upon the altar? The Gemara answers, there is this blood which is sprinkled upon the altar. The Gemara asks, but isn't there the log of oil of a leper that he brings on the day that he becomes ritually clean, which is given completely to the priest? The Gemara answers, it is not given completely to the priest, as there are its placements, when oil is sprinkled 7 times before the Lord, Leviticus 14:16, and applied to lepers' right ear, thumb, and big toe, see Leviticus 14:17. The Gemara asks, and what is meant when the Mishnah emphasizes, and in the case of those offerings, the power of the priest is greater than the power of the altar? The Gemara answers, this wording serves to exclude the opinion of one who says the 2 loaves that are brought by themselves, unaccompanied by the requisite 2 lambs, may not be offered, and instead of being eaten, they go to be burnt. By emphasizing that 2 loaves and shewbread are eaten by the priest and not placed on the altar, the Mishnah teaches us that in this case, the power of the priest is always greater, even if the 2 lambs are not offered with the 2 loaves. Mishnah. Kol hamnachos v'na'asos b'chi uno shalosh matno shemen yitzika uvlila umaton shemen b'chi kodem la'asiyasan. All the meal offerings that are prepared in a vessel. What does that mean? According to some, the Mishnah is speaking specifically of the meal offering prepared in a pan or a deep pan, but not a meal offering of fine flour. Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi. Others hold that the 3 applications of oil also apply to the meal offerings of fine flour, like a Mishnah and Mishnah the Menachot Daf Sefer Hilchot Components 13.5. Considering the Mishnah's broad categorization, all meal offerings, Rashi comments, such as the meal offerings prepared in a pan and the meal offerings prepared in a deep pan. Later authority discuss whether Rashi means to indicate that the meal offering of fine flour is included or excluded from this category. Zaharat HaKodesh Zeratodeh Zehamakoma. E.g., the offerings placed in a pan or a deep pan requires 3 placements of oil. Oil is applied 3 times to the meal offering brought as fine flour. First, the priest places oil into a utensil, to which he adds the fine flour. Then he adds more oil to the fine flour and mixes the flour in it. After he places the mixture in the service vessel and pours oil into it. All in all, he uses 1 log of oil for each tenth of an eighth of fine flour. This is in accordance with the Mishnah. Sefer Hilchot Components 13.5, see the Mishnah there. Listed here in the reverse order of their placement. Pouring oil on the cakes after they have been cooked, and mixing oil into the flour, and the placement of oil into the vessel prior to the preparation of the meal offerings. Why does the Mishnah list the placement of oil out of chronological order? The Mishnah follows the listing in the Torah, in which the first process is mentioned last. First, the verse states, fine flour unleavened mixed with oil. You shall break it in pieces and pour oil upon it. Leviticus 2:5-6. Only in the next verse does the Torah state, it should be made of fine flour and oil, teaching that the oil is poured first into the empty utensil to first Yisrael of the meal offerings. In the meal offerings that come as loaves, it is after the flour has been baked into loaves that one breaks them into pieces and mixes them with oil. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And the Rabbi says it is with fine flour that one mixes the oil. Although the loaves of the meal offering baked in an oven require mixing of their flour with oil, wafers do not require mixing, but rather a smearing of oil on them after baking. How does one smear oil on them? He does so in a shape similar to the Greek letter Chi. Chi is the Greek letter X, the 22nd letter of the Greek alphabet. There is no letter with this shape in the Hebrew alphabet, therefore the Gemara cites the Greek letter Chi in order to describe the form in which the oil was smeared. The Gemara explains in the ensuing discussion that the Mishnah refers to the Greek letter Chi. The anointing of high priest is performed by applying the oil in the same manner in the form of the letter Chi. By contrast, the Gemara's discussion elsewhere in Karitot 5b does not assume the same method was employed in anointing the priest. There are a number of different opinions with regard to the exact identification of the letter in question, and many early commentators, corroborated by sketches extant in early manuscripts, describe a shape resembling an inverted chaf. Rambam Sefer Hilchot Kriya Mikdash 1.9, an inverted letter Nun. Rashi commentary on Exodus 29.2, or the letter Tet. Rashi here Rabbeinu Gershom Gola. Later commentaries identify a form in another shape portrayed here to Eretz Yisrael on Zevachim 10.8 to a Shlema addenda to Parshas Tetzaveh letter Kaf. X, and the rest of the oil remaining after smearing is eaten by priests. With regard to the statement of the Mishnah that all the meal offerings prepared in a vessel require 3 placements of oil, the Gemara asks to exclude what does the Mishnah specify meal offerings prepared in a vessel. Rav Papa said the Mishnah serves to exclude the oven-baked meal offering. Some commentators explain that the oven-baked meal offering is excluded from the requirement to pour the oil, but it still requires the other 2 applications of oil, i.e. mixing and placing into an empty vessel. Others hold that the oven-baked meal offering is also excluded from the requiring the first step of placing of the oil into an empty vessel, and that it requires only the application of oil for the sake of mixing. Mishnah and the Melech on Rambam Sefer Hilchot Components 13.5. With regard to the oven-baked meal offering of loaves, no oil is poured upon them, and the verse states unleavened loaves mixed with oil. If he brings wafers, the flour is kneaded in tepid water, and the wafers are smeared in oil, as the verse states, and unleavened wafers smeared with oil. Elaborating on the smearing, the Rambam writes that it appears to me that he smears them after baking. This is in accordance with our public explanation of the Mishnah. Rambam Sefer Hilchot 13.8. whose preparation does not require the use of a service vessel, as it is merely baked in an oven. Such a meal offering does not require the pouring of the oil. With regard to the three placements of oil in a pan meal offering and a deep pan meal offering, the sages taught that the verse states, and if your offering is a deep pan meal offering, it shall be made of fine flour in oil, Leviticus 2:7. This teaches that it requires the placement of oil in an empty vessel, and the flour is added afterward. In addition, the term meal offering in this verse and the term meal offering in Leviticus 2:5, written with regard to the meal offering prepared in a pan, are understood to teach a verbal analogy. That's the end of the Omid. Thank you for listening and all the best. Bye.